This episode of The Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 97 of the Construction Record podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today. The Construction Record is an official podcast partner of Buildings Week, brought to you virtually by The Building Show and BuildX Alberta from November 30th to December 4th. For more information or to register, visit www.thebuildingshow.com. In today's episode of The Construction Record, I'm excited to share with you a conversation I had with Ashley and Jeff Kielbratowski of Harbr. Harbr is a construction tech startup that's based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's an award-winning initiative. And the focus of Harbr is looking at construction scheduling data to create better insight and efficiencies, analytics, and predictions to help projects stay on time, on budget, and expose opportunities for more efficiency. The interesting thing about Harbr and why I've been excited to talk to them is not just about the technology itself, which is all in the power of the palm of your hand. What Harbr delivers runs via SMS, via text, not necessarily an app. So it's very accessible, and from listening to construction stakeholders that have used it, when you look at some of the testimonials or just talk to folks that are familiar with Harbr, they find that it's a very efficient way to kind of track some of that data and track their problems and find efficiencies. So I talked with Ashley and Jeff recently, not just about the technology itself, but how they launched Harbr and what they looked at in trying to bring to market their tech and their vision. And I found that was a very worthwhile conversation to share with you, because in the end, what Jeff and Ashley shared with me is that little kernel of truth, that nugget that we've here at the Construction Record have been hearing consistently when we talk about innovation and we talk to the people that bring innovation to construction. That nugget is this: when Harbr was looking at doing what they were going to do, they didn't think about building what they wanted to build and bring it to the construction industry. They actually consulted with the industry, with stakeholders, to find out the gaps and find out what was needed. Then they went back and used their collective expertise to deliver this technology to construction. So join me as you learn a bit more about Harbr in this conversation with Jeff and Ashley Kielbratowski of Harbr. Here we go. Thank you.
The Construction Record is brought to you by the BC Construction Safety Alliance. Through programs, services, training, and consultations, the BCCSA is making safety simpler. Find out more at bccsa.ca.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Construction Record podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today for this special feature interview with the leaders of Harbr. Those of you that aren't familiar with Harbr, are probably really going to enjoy what you're going to hear as far as the innovation that they've brought to construction and development as a firm. So with me, I'll let them introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ashley Kielbratowski, one of the founders. I'm so happy to be here with you today, Vince.
And Jeff Kielbratowski, one of the founders as well, and we're happy to talk to you.
Thank you. Thanks for making the time, Ashley and Jeff. Really think for some of our listeners, our readers as well, they may not be familiar with Harbr. And I think as we explore this idea in this conversation around how innovation is brought to the industry, and maybe kind of your tangible examples or experiences in doing so, and sharing those would be helpful. And as well, I want to explore the concept of leadership in construction, or leadership at a firm, especially during the COVID era. I'd love to hear what your experience has been since March.
Yeah, so we've been around for just over 4 years now, and we are a construction startup based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And really our goal from the beginning was to provide visibility from site to office really, really easily. And Harbr provides instant visibility into matching work done to payments. So connecting the progress on the field now to actually what needs to be billed accurately at that really granular level. Jeff and I both worked in construction, in development for a developer, and that gave us a lot of really great insights into what happens physically in the office and the structure of what's going on, and then also what's going on in the job site, and connecting those two worlds, which is not an easy world to kind of sync up what's happening in real time. So that's kind of where we started 4 years ago, was trying to connect those dots.
And how'd you find that? You probably did some exploratory work on the market itself, like maybe people that were in that space. But I would imagine that when you tried to talk, did you talk to a series of developers, owners, GCs to kind of get a better sense of what they were seeing in those areas?
I think with any technology startup, the big thing you have to do is not build something without knowing what you should even be focusing on. So for us, we went out and spoke to really as many people as we could, actually over the course of about 6 months before we even touched anything on the technical side. Really just honing in on the problems that they were having. And we were chatting with landlords and developers, general contractors and subcontractors, and also consultants to those firms as well. We really wanted to make sure that we were hitting all the different people in the vertical and horizontal to make sure that if we were going to build something, we were focusing on the main thing that they wanted solved. So you think of talking to all these different people, there were hundreds of different problems that we heard, but what was interesting is it always came back to good data. So just as an overarching theme for our company, that was always our focus, was, okay, we keep hearing about this problem and that problem, but from a solution, it's really, can we get good data to help represent what our customer actually needs and wants?
So you do your due diligence as a firm to try to figure that out, but then you get to the building of it, right? To the making the rubber hit the road. You also have a co-founder by the name of Dave Kim, correct? Yeah. And he came from an IT world, brought to the other end of kind of the formula. So what Harbr was Harbr was going to turn into?
Yeah, that's right. So I actually was hired while working for the developer. I did other consulting and projects on my own on the design side of things. So Dave and his wife actually had hired me to do a little home renovation redesign project. So that's how we actually met. And like most people can experience or know about those home renovation projects, you hit a lot of bumps in the roads. There's many headaches. And kind of through that process, him having that technical way of thinking and that kind of different perspective and outlook than what we had, it was a real serendipitous experience of how we kind of collided, because the communication and kind of that updating and progress was a problem just on that small project. So we wanted to dive further in and talk to more people that we knew in our network and say, okay, what does this problem look like at scale? And obviously it's much bigger when you're dealing with bigger projects, bigger developments, multi-site, high volume construction. So we were able to validate that very, very quickly, that there were a ton of different problems, but the one we wanted to focus on was like, how do we get these instant updates around progress and what's happening really simply?
I find it interesting because with that, it's a basic need of info. Give me the info, give me the data, so I can make a more informed decision. But with the construction industry, in particular with Canada, we've seen the studies before. It's a laggard when it comes to innovation and adopting new techniques and new processes. So for yourselves, was there a lesson learned, though you did your due diligence and understood what stakeholders in the industry needed, but in that delivery, as far as adaptation or customization of what you were building, did that stay front of mind? I would imagine it may have, because it's an industry that likes to do things the way they do things, essentially, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point, and would tell a lot of the story of what we went through over the last 4 years. You know, let's say that we went through 80 different versions of what the product actually is today, and it's still continuously being developed and enhanced to better the customer. Now, early on, it hey, we'll develop this great app, we'll give it to them, they'll use it, love it, and we'll never have to develop it again. That's just not the reality when it comes to technology. One, it's moving really fast, so you have to adopt really quickly. But what we realize is that giving someone another application was actually setting ourselves up for the potential for failure, because they're getting technology from all these different customers that they're working with, all these different contractors that they're working with. And it's almost bombarding a lot of times. And sometimes there's not a continuation for the contractor or the subcontractor, depending on the project that they're working on. So it's something that when we actually sat back and focused on how do we remove even more barriers, because we always talk about removing barriers for adoption and stuff like that. When we stepped back and actually reevaluated it, it basically, we saw an opportunity with text message. So we said, could we get the same data, connect it to the schedule with a text message? And the answer was yes. And that's what we focused on over the last few months, was actually optimizing that workflow, because every single user out there likely text messages to some extent. So it was very interesting when we started doing discovery around that. You know, there's a great application and a platform out there that's well adopted. But for us as a company, knowing that that's not the ideal for everyone, and even if you wanted to move into the subcontracting layer, that text messaging piece is huge, because you're now able to get them to adopt something they're used to, update information within seconds, as opposed to thinking about, oh, I have to do another report, I have a lot of data input. It's, hey, drywall will be done Friday. Come Friday, drywall done. Those are the only things that they have to input, which is super interesting.
It is interesting, and it's kind of one of those aha moments sometimes that I get to enjoy when I hear you describe that, Jeff. Like, we think about the entry points to innovation in construction for guys, for firms, both guys and girls, in construction. They're used, probably as far as technology, if they have a smartphone and they're of a certain era, understanding text message is probably one of the first things they ever did. So basically, the text messaging doesn't require an app. It's kind of an open platform that way for them to be linked into what you do.
Yeah, so they can just use their natural language that they would use to text their friend or, you know, a family member. Right. And that directly, there's kind of like a bot that welcomes them into the product, and then they just have to text back to that. And then that also ties into the master schedule. So it's not just a free-flowing text updates. It's actually attached to a piece of work that they're associated with. So that's kind of where our bread and butter is, that way that no one else is really doing. No one's tying that text back to a schedule.
Interesting. Now, as far as usage of what you've created, is it primarily on the developer side? Is it developers and owners using it more? Do you have GCs? Maybe give a sense of the sectors of the industry that are intersecting with Harbr.
Yeah, for sure. So ownership groups mostly, because they really want more information. They don't want to have to chase around for it. We know that a lot of them play that kind of middle person trying to collect information and find out the status. So now they're able at a high level to log in, get the information in real time like they want. And because it's a distributed product, it impacts everyone. So we do kind of have that easy onboard, easy to use product that is the text message service, but then also it benefits their customer, who is our customer. So everyone kind of benefits from having that visibility and those updates and access to the right data. When it comes to hurdles and actually understanding the market, it's figuring out exactly what does the industry need. And instead of just taking an old process and adding it to the cloud or kind of adding things on top of it, the market doesn't necessarily need another bidding platform, another reporting software, or collaborative document system. So we had to find kind of the opportunity and where that problem was and who it affects and find that gap. So we remained different in the sense of connecting the master schedule to text message for progress updates. So by updates coming and rolling through that way, we're able to provide risk analysis for all projects and then allow all those stakeholders involved to understand at any given second where the progress is and kind of where the budgeted amounts are. And it just makes it much easier for them to continue the management of the progress claims, because that's a huge problem with the industry. And it's not that we necessarily want to kind of disrupt that. It's just like, this is how you're doing it. Maybe it's time to reevaluate and be a bit more efficient by having this kind of supplement what you're already doing. And that's where Harbr fits in, is let's let you log into the software and do the same thing you're doing via paperwork, phone calls, emails. And that's the world I really lived in for those 3 or 4 years, is kind of trying to coordinate all those moving parts, and it isn't easy.
So do you have a customer care team that helps kind of nurture that, elimination of the unknown? Kind of what's your approach as far as a firm around something like that?
What we found that's interesting with the customer base is they all want technology, but they do need help getting it over the line. So that's something that up front we're very forward with, just saying, let's make the decision on, one, that you want to buy the product, and then 2, let us take it from there. So whether it's their internal team or external team that we have to train, for us, it's all about success with that specific user to provide value to our customer. So we have a customer care team and a process that is set up to do that onboarding for the external partners and the collaborators within the organization within roughly about 10 to 15 minutes. And then for the actual management team who's going to be coordinating the projects, their training session is really only about 45 to 60 minutes. It's very light. And we've had some companies that have actually stepped back and just said, let me onboard myself. It seems easy enough. And then we're just there to support and make sure that they don't fall short.
One of the other big things we've been discussing since the pandemic really took root here in Canada is, besides the influence of technology and innovation in construction, and now's the time for a reset, some people say, it's also, how do you lead during this time? And I'm curious to kind of hear about your approach, because these have been unprecedented times. And I wonder how Harbr has kind of handled leadership, I guess, in the context of what's happening now with COVID.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a time. I mean, COVID really shook everyone in so many different ways that for the next few years, the world will not be the same. And I think it's a good opportunity for people now, especially in this industry where innovation is, not always as fast as we'd like it to be, but it's a time when people are really looking to be more efficient, because some companies might be bleeding more money than they're used to bleeding, and how can they actually kind of restructure and be smart? And this is kind of where technology can really be your friend. It's not necessarily something that you should shy away or retract from. It's there to help simplify things that you may not even know that you need help with. So I think that we're looking just to support people in our industry and kind of stand behind the people that have been doing things for so many years and kind of support them, even if our software isn't what they need. We kind of love just checking in with people, talking to them, doing some customer discovery and research, and finding out what their problems are, and maybe we can help in any way. And finding those champions at companies that get what you're doing, whether it's an older generation, kind of the up and coming people in the company, just whoever actually has that moment, that light bulb that says, this is going to make my life so much easier and my team. And then of course that will benefit the company to make everyone's life easier. So kind of finding those champions and talking to people is what we like to do right now, and making sure that the industry feels confident moving forward in the times of COVID and what's to come in the future.
How about on that kind of track of confidence? How about with your team itself, the Harbr team? What have you found? Have there been challenging times for you folks as you kind of manage your development and work processes during a time when the industry had to shut down, had to wake up again in some jurisdictions, and just uncertain times for employees? Like, we mobilized and sent our employees home at the beginning of COVID, and we're still working from home. What did you as leaders of Harbr kind of do to help make sure your team had confidence in you and still working?
I think we're a bit lucky in the sense that we've always been kind of set up for the remote workflow structure because we have had members across the country and some here locally that just prefer and like to work remote. And that's kind of helped us keep momentum moving forward. Of course, there were a few weeks when it was a bit scary and there was a lot of unknown for everyone, but we were able to kind of optimize what we already had in place and kind of keep that ball rolling. Of course, we use things like Slack. We can use Harbr for our own tracking of certain projects as well that we're doing internally. And just make sure that we have a sense of culture and community, even if it's by distance, which is a lot of Zoom calls like we're doing today with you, Vince, and kind of having that framework and making sure everyone's okay. And leadership isn't something that really stops. We kind of just stood with each other and with our team members and kept ensuring that we could move forward and everything was going to be okay.
Did it actually still really feel kind of business as usual since that was your setup?
I think the big thing for us was, as the founders, we stepped back and just said, do we need to change anything? So there were a lot of internal discussions that we had. Are we set up for what the next few years is going to look like? And I think with what Ashley said, we were fortunate that the tools and stuff were already in place, but I mean, just the odd personal check-in to a team member, I think because you don't understand what people are dealing with at home, even let's say they have family, they're not used to having kids at home during their work hours. So there's just a different dynamic of how people are delivering their work. But one thing that we've actually found is people are a lot more purposeful in the things that they're delivering. They're delivering them, well within the timelines that are expected. And it seems that, definitely over the last few months, people are a lot more comfortable with what's going on out there today. But from a leadership standpoint, just making sure that we're keeping tabs on the things that are going on and just maintain the leadership.
Are you seeing an uptick that way? People that are approaching you and asking you for demos or information that you never heard from before since March?
It's been very interesting since everything went down February onward, or March onward, I guess. But it's a lot of companies that we were chasing that, like we said earlier, there's a lot of people who were interested in technology. They know that they need it in their organization, but now it's actually given them a chance to pause and rethink the needs that they have to fulfill within the organization when it comes to technology. So yes, more people are reaching out to us, but even the people that we're reaching out to, they just have a different mentality of what it is that we're talking to them about. And another thing too is that, say for us, a lot of times the decisions have to happen at the VP, director, or C level. Those people are a lot more open to conversation right now. And a lot of them are at their desk, at their home, taking calls because it's looking to the future of the company as opposed to dealing with all the stuff that they had to in the past. So it's a very interesting time for that. And I think as a tech company, it opens up a whole new slew of opportunities for us.
Sure. And I wonder, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ashley.
And so many precautions, like you said, there's extra health and safety measurements that are on site, which can be a big challenge for people getting to and from site. So that's why, with what's happening, technology is so important in the way we move forward in the world. I spoke to someone the other day who said that they took someone from New York to Colorado. They sent 3 different people to one job site to take additional pictures because they couldn't quite understand exactly where the project was. And I mean, the States is a bit different than how things are going in Canada right now, of course, but flying people around the country like project managers and coordinators to check in, that just seems a bit more challenging and a bit unnecessary in today's world, considering what's happening. So I think that adopting new processes and technologies are really going to make sense more and more because they'll have a whole new purpose. It's not, Harbr's trying to sell the software to us, we should probably take a look at it. It's like, this really doesn't make sense. And we're spending a lot of money and a lot of resources trying to kind of get things done when there's other options.
Right. And we've heard that from I know you had listened to one of our recent panel discussions, one of our podcasts on industry innovations, and Mallory Brody of Bridget was bringing up there's an efficiency in listening to your customer and trying to deliver the efficiencies they seek, because sometimes there are things that maybe weren't in the initial scope. But there's also this moment, it seems like, with startups, especially in the contact world, where, you know what, there is another product there that's out in the market that, could help our client as well. And is there opportunities for partnerships or to modify or customize what we're building so our client gets the best value? I guess my question is around the contact community itself. I guess in your out in Nova Scotia, or the world you live, are you seeing a lot more of that kind of outreach as well? Maybe from other players. I'm not looking for insider info, what I mean, about any potential mergers or purchase offers, but more, do you find your other compatriots in the contact world kind of reaching out as well?
I think it's a very interesting time for that. And even pre-COVID, we found that the larger enterprise-wide providers are very much open for business when it comes to integrations or partnerships. So it's something that we haven't made any big moves on this yet, but we do know that it is coming, because once again, looking at the needs of our customer when it comes to a certain CRM or an ERP that they already have, or maybe even a bigger scheduling software, and then moving into also 3D modeling. We know that those are things that we're not going to master or even attempt to build inside our company, focusing on the things that we do well, and then looking for the right partners at the right time.
So as we wrap up here, a discussion with Jeff and Ashley, I have to ask, what does the future look like for Harbr, let's say over the next 3 to 6 months, 3 to 12 months?
We'd like to see ourselves really in every pocket on the job site, and then the finance departments can then depend on the accuracy of the information to better process their payments and request progress draws. So that's really what we're laser focused on, and where we're heading, definitely in the very, very near future.
Sounds good. Jeff, anything else that you'd like to share with the audience as we wrap up?
I think what's interesting, because we've moved into the SMS world, it's now no barrier is in front of us from a data collection standpoint, but it's now dealing with organizations and talking about data opportunities. So when we think of construction, there is no shortage of data. There's a ton out there. Every organization has it, but it's usually in a very unstructured way that's living in cold storage. It's not really being used outside of legal disputes. Where we come in with granular type data, really to whatever type of data that you want to collect, it's then talking to people at the decision-making level as to what do you want out of it. Ashley mentioned something about risk profiling, moving into processing payments, matching work done to progress draws. Those are things that we can pull off as a company very easily if directed by the customer. So there's other things that we know that are going to come into the fold of our business based on being able to collect that data. So it's very exciting for us to look at.
Perfect. Well, with that, how can people find Harbr if they want to find out more information about what you folks do?
You can always connect with us on LinkedIn. That's kind of where we do definitely a lot of posting and kind of interactions with industry folks on there. You can find us on Twitter at GoHarbr, GoHarbr, a few less vowels there at the end. So feel free to reach out to us, or team@harbr.com. You can email us as well.
Well, perfect. Well, Jeff, Ashley, thank you so much for making the time. I really think that our discussion is going to help some of our listeners, think about efficiency in their workplace and leadership as well.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone listening that kind of wants to dive further into what we're doing. We're always happy and available to chat.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. That was Jeff and Ashley from Harbr. My thanks to the both of them for a really interesting and enlightening conversation. If you want to learn more about Harbr, visit www.harbr.com. Looking ahead to next week on the Construction Record, we will have a special Building Week show promotion, and that episode will be dropping on Friday, November 13th. So please stay tuned for that and learn a bit more about the Buildings Week show this year, which is going to be brought to you virtually. And looking down the road a little bit past that, the podcast team and I are looking forward to celebrating with you and sharing with you our 100th episode. That'll be coming in about 3 weeks. So stay tuned to the social media platforms that we have via the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce for a bit of engagement and a bit of fun that we want to have with you around our award-winning podcast. So once again, this is Vince Versace signing off. Thank you, everyone.